Tom Del Valle, Dallas, Texas.
How many years were at AMA?
6 years, 67 to 73.
So you were part of F Troop.
I was. That was the first in that new barrack.
Where did you come from?
My parents lived in Venezuela at the time, and working for the airlines. So when I was 13, it seemed like a really good idea to go to the States for the first time, rather than vacation.
Your adjustment process, your adjustment period was much more difficult than anyone else.
Well, it was actually the first time I'd ever lived in the United States, so it was very strange. And then to come to Virginia was strange. And then to go to a military school was completely, never really on deck as an option, and it popped up and I showed up and it was over. So it was pretty quick, but it was great. I mean, the rule was I was to give my father 1 year, my mother 1 year. So if they figured if they could hook me for 2, they'd get me for the balance, and they were absolutely right. So that's how I went in.
Do you remember your first student authority figure?
Yeah, absolutely. It's our lieutenant in F Company, F Troop, I think it was called, and it was Bob Crozier. Yeah, Bob Crozier, and he was just, he was picture perfect, chiseled, very intense, and a good guy. And so that was my first student authority figure.
So did you have to walk the line, and did you have inspections? And
Had all of that, yeah. So we walked the line. I think it was only for the first 6 months, as I recall, and then and we did all the Sunday morning inspections and all the usual customary reveille at 6 o'clock in the morning, and 5 minutes on the blacktop, and look who went AWOL the night before. So
when you were living in Venezuela, you went to the American school?
I did.
So
I did.
Language wasn't a problem?
No, it really wasn't. And English was my family language, so it was okay. It was just, it was a little, culturally, a little bit different.
Do you recall how AMA was chosen, how you ended up at AMA?
Well, my father was a Marine, or is a Marine, still around. And and Virginia just, was all about military schools and tradition and history. So it was rich in that regard in his mind. So I think we looked at Fork Union, I think they looked at Fishburne, and frankly just settled on AMA. They liked the campus, they liked the tradition, and then they announced that to me. So that was about, my participation was to show up.
Did you have a special teacher or a favorite subject? You were there for 6 years.
I was there for 6 years, yeah. There were several. I think, when you look back on it, the most significant person for me at AMA from the faculty was probably Don Studer, and he was a rifle team coach. And we are still fast friends, and he is just a phenomenal person. So I took a lot of cues from him. As far as the actual faculty, Colonel Hoover was just an icon. So if you survived his class, and I actually liked math, I didn't get hit with the eraser but about 4 times. So it was good. I think Hoover had his impact in his own peculiar sort of way.
What did you do with your free time after classes when you were on campus?
I never had a TV, so that was a little strange. We had one of our guys in the company had a TV, and we watched the Wild Wild West and Star Trek. And for a guy who'd never had a TV, that was just like nirvana. So we locked into that after drill and spent a lot of time doing that. And then obviously on a rifle team, we did a lot of practice, so that really consumed a lot of our time.
How did you get involved in roller rifles?
Well, like
freshman?
I think I probably was a freshman. I'm trying to think of when my first year on the team. It was probably when I was a freshman, and the way they went through that process, you were selected and then approved, and then they came in and tagged you, and it was an honor to be on the squad. So and then I stayed on it through the balance of that time there, and it was nice. I think my senior year I was either a squad leader on the team or I think it was a squad leader on the team.
And what were the type of events that you participated in?
Well, we did a lot of we did a lot of parades, so the Harrisonburg parades, the Stanton parades, out in Waynesboro, we did those as well. Obviously, on our own campus, we did a lot of different exhibitions. Probably the most memorable exhibition for me was when we were asked and tasked to perform at halftime in a basketball. And I forget what game it was, but it was, to me, it was very intense because normally you're on a field, you're 50 to 100 yards out, and we're in a basketball. I mean, when you're sitting inside of that organization, there are people like within 10, 15 feet from you. It's also very loud, and so everything had to be extremely precise. And so that was probably the most intense, and I think we did a pretty good job all the way around. So that became what we really liked to do. I mean, we did the regular parades that we were invited to, but going to halftime games in a basketball season was phenomenal.
And Royal Rifles actually sustained itself a little bit after the closure of the school. Well, there was a period of time, yes or no, that maybe you guys got together again?
Yeah, I think, Bob, what happened was, and I'll tell you how we reconstituted it, if you will, but we would come to these reunions and everybody would sit around and talk about the old days and so on. And it was a fellow named Jim Hash, who is still with us, but not at this event today or this weekend. But Jim just sort of blurted this out, saying, you know what, why don't we try to reconstitute the Royal Rifles? And everybody kind of booed the idea or whatever. I mean, look at us, compared to what we were. So we sort of dismissed that. And then Gary Granger and I were heading back to Texas, and we both rode our motorcycles up, so we were heading back on a bike trip. And I think it was someplace in Tennessee. We had pulled off to have a cigar and whatever, and Gary said, why don't you kind of go do that? And I said, do what? He said, why don't we reconstitute the Royal Rifles? I said, God, the logistics would just be astounding. So, as typical Gary, he can pretty much convince you into doing anything. So he hit me up a couple more times on the trip back, and then I got to thinking about it, and I thought, maybe we could actually do this. So I enlisted the help of a bunch of people, and it was a monumentous, it was just a phenomenally complicated task, but people stepped up, and we brought them back together for the first time. I think we marched 3 different years, and it was pretty amazing, the muscle memory, the commands, the cadence. It was amazing that we were able to sort of recreate all that.
Do you recall any of the fellow Royal Rifles that joined you during those 3-year period when you reconstituted?
Sure. I mean, George Roverosa, in fact, was our guide arm. And Mike Kidd took one of the squads, and Joe Gary, Doug Pennock was our commander. We had Gary Granger. Jim Hash didn't march with us, but cheered us on because he had some physical issues he was trying to deal with. But a great team, and in fact, we had Larry Nicholson, now a 3-star in the Marine Corps, join us as well, and it was just phenomenal. It was great. So a really good bunch of guys.
It just wasn't sustainable.
I think when you do it first time, it's pretty exciting. The second time, it was still good. Then we kind of paused for about a year, and because it just got a little stale. And so I put the team together again and said, okay, why don't we do it just one more time, but let's just kind of send it off, and this will be the final event for the Royal Rifles. So in the final event, so we took a 2-year hiatus. In the final event, I asked a bunch of people that I knew that were always wanting to do something a little extra. They were good friends, to help us close out the Royal Rifles. So a fellow by the name of Mike Elliott, who's a Golden Knight. Mike Elliott didn't go to AMA. He's an Army Golden Knight, their special parachute team. Dana Bowman, who was a Golden Knight, lost both of his legs, and a host of other guys, a couple of guys on the Night Stalkers that wanted to help out, came up that weekend. And the event was to have the march, but also to have the commander come off of a parachute jump. Well, the commander was Doug Pennock. So Doug got assigned to Mike Elliott on a tandem jump. They flew over the field, came in, landed in the middle of the field. Doug joined the team up on the blacktop. We formed up and we did the exercise and the drill and came back up, and for the last time called up the roller rifles and dismissed the platoon. It was very, very emotional. I mean, it was, I don't think it's sustainable. It's something you do because it just pulls at your heart. But if you do it every year, it just becomes sort of process, and we didn't want it to become process, so we wanted to do it right. We had a lot of people that spent a lot of time doing it right. We had a challenge coin developed for the roller rifles. All the uniforms were sourced from the military. It was just a lot of work to get it done. And if you did it every year, it just become mundane, I think, just normal sort of thing. Besides that, some of it was hard, getting a hard time getting around the field. So it was best we closed it out the way we did. So it was great. It was great fun.
When you graduated in '72, how did you celebrate?
So I graduated in '73. How did I celebrate? Well, I didn't cut my hair for about almost 9 months, and I drank a fair amount and drove down to Florida, and I think I completely went off the grid for almost a year. It seemed appropriate. It worked really well, and then you have to wake up and decide to go do other things. But
So how did you end up in Dallas with American Airlines?
well, it's sort of an interesting story. I was actually in Miami at the time and looking for a job. They posted jobs as flight attendants. And so I went up and interviewed to be a flight attendant with them in 1976 and got the job. And 38 years later, retired from American as their senior vice president of airport operations. So I had a whole host of different jobs in between, and we spent time in Europe, we spent time in the Caribbean, overseeing different operations, and you know, it was similar to Augusta Military Academy in that the esprit de corps at American was very good and something I had an impact on, and so it worked well for me. And to go from being a flight attendant to a senior officer was great fun. Wouldn't change it.
And your family today?
So my family today, married in Dallas. Patty is my wife. I have two daughters, Annie and Avery. Now, Annie went to TCU, so close, at least in the state, and Avery went to Rollins College out in Florida. And they're doing great. And in fact, Annie, my oldest, just got married back in November, so that was a lot of fun. And so now we have one to go. You know, at this juncture, probably every year to every other year.
And what's your takeaway?
Sort of a critical path at this juncture. I think people need to get a whole lot more involved in the process. I think everybody does what they can to keep it alive, but our needs far exceed our wishes at this point. We actually have to deliver, and I'm a little concerned by that. I think the change of leadership is healthy and necessary, and I think they'll do the right body of work. It's just pretty critical at this juncture.
My next question was, what can be done to promote the legacy?
I do think it's going to have to be an effort led by a few that is going to bring us all back into a room to try to hold this together for any length of time. I think, again, there are a lot of people with a big heart and wanting to do the right thing, just unable to get it done. So it's going to be interesting. I think the next 5 years are going to be very telling. But I'm optimistic. You know, we've been here before. We've done difficult work before, so I think it'll be okay.
What are your memories of the mess hall?
Oh, geez. Not good. So memories of the mess hall were, I don't want to say anything bad, but I will give you a good and a bad story. So the bad story would be hot chocolate with about 2 inches of dead maggots at the bottom of the hot chocolate. After everybody drank, the entire mess hall threw up. The entire mess hall, the entire corps just purged. Once everybody recognized, once one table went, the next table went, the next table, it was the most astounding moment in time. And then for 2 days, nobody wanted to go back into the mess hall because it was such a mess. But that was bad. So, but good memories were the structure in the mess hall. You know, you didn't sit down until the head of your table came, who was usually an officer. You didn't start eating until that structure was good. It was different. You know, it's just like, it wasn't proper manners. It was simply structure. And I was in need of a lot of structure in those days.
You still have it?
Still do, yeah. Much to my family's chagrin at times. It's a little different when you're in the civilian world trying to bring that level of structure to play. But yeah, absolutely. Everything I do in my life is structured that way.
What's your most memorable sporting event?
Well, I think to me, a lot of people had different sports that they participated in. To me, it was being on a rifle team. It was winning some of the national tournaments. A team of guys that put in a lot of work day in, day out on being extremely precise about what they did. So you couldn't go into that firing range and not be very, very focused and buttoned down and disciplined about what you were doing on your body mechanics, on your breathing, on your sight pictures, all those things that we worked very, very hard under Don Studer's guidance to get right. And when we got it right, and it was just fantastic. So
Studer was a special guy.
Totally a special guy. Still is today. He was unique in so many different ways. You had the faculty, and then you had the military department, and then you had Don Studer, who was obviously part of the military department. But he was very open to at least having a discussion about something different. He then did it his way anyway, which was great, and he had the rank to do that. But he really cared about the people that were on the team. I mean, genuinely cared about each and every one of us. And no matter what missteps we had along the way, he was rather tolerant about that. Well, up into a point, and then he wasn't so tolerant, but that's okay. But he's a very special guy. Super.
Did you ever walk tours?
Damn, hell of a question. Yes, sir, I did. I actually held the, and it's a thing to be proud of, no, but at one point, 1970, I managed to get myself in a whole lot of trouble and had, I know, shocking, had I think something like 320 tours, which was unheard of. And so I spent a lot of time on the blacktop. I know about every inch of that place. And that's where I spent my year of 1970, was on the blacktop. Everybody else did other things. I spent my entire year out there. Lesson learned.
320 hours of tours means that you probably they forced you to stay there an extra year to finish.
Pretty much. It was every Saturday. It was half Sundays. It was every afternoon. I got to go to church, which was my only attempt to go to Stewart Hall and visit, but that was it.
What's your most humorous memory of AMA?
Wow, there's so many of them. I mean, there were humorous memories. I think going back every year, whether it was humorous or emotional, the first day going back, a lot of people talk about their graduating day, and mine was just like everybody else's. It was very, very, very emotional. But I always remember best my first day back every year. So you have your summer break, and my first day back to get to see all the guys you haven't seen for 3 months was always my best time. Story tells, you just could not stop people from talking about what they were doing, how they were doing, what they were going to do. But it was always good to see all those guys come back and form up again and spend another year. And to me, that was the best time.
If I say the word chalk, what does it mean to you?
Usually followed promptly by an eraser doing Mach 7 across a classroom for somebody who was falling asleep that Hoover would deck from the chalkboard. Loud noises.
What's the definition of a blue streak?
That was our sporting teams. It was, I think it was our lacrosse teams and football teams. That was their logo or our school.
Augusta Military Academy Blue Streaks.
Blue Streaks, right.
But what is a blue streak?
The lightning bolt, if I recall. We were the Hawkeyes on a rifle team. I don't know how we got away from the blue streak on a rifle team, but somehow we ended up being the Hawkeyes. The Don Studer in a failed moment. Yeah.
That was the first time I've asked that today. You know what chalk is?
So does he.
Oh, yeah.
Is that his name, Bob Mitchell?
Actually, okay.
Yeah, Bob
so-
Mitchell, yeah.
Large
Yeah.
white
And
pastor?
remember John West?
No, it was John West.
John West.
It was John West that did that.
Okay, so it was John West. Okay, so I'd like a redo on that chalk moment because I have a little side. You can use that one too, but I have a little side story
About John West. I'll ask you to
No,
remember.
about
Chalk.
chalk. About chalk.
About chalk.
Yeah, about chalk. You can use either one. So
When I say chalk, what is it? What comes to mind?
it was a noise made by your hand, either on your chest or on your thigh, and some were really, really good at it. Like Gary Granger made some incredible noises come off of that body. But John West, everybody knew how to produce chalk. I will tell you that being a father of two girls, trying to explain to the two girls how to produce chalk and what chalk was all about, made them run to their rooms to be sure they weren't subject to being the noisemakers for the day. But now today, in their fine ages of 24 and 27, they can do their own version of chalk. So I think they're very skilled ladies. So just
You may be the only alumni that has children that know how to do
I'm
chalk.
trying to keep the tradition going,
Hey,
you know,
I'm
whatever it
behind-
takes.
I'm behind you. Final question. What are your memories of John West?
A big guy, real big guy. He was huge. To me, he was huge. But he was always pretty fair. But you had to get through that first moment of facing him and whatever he was intensely focused on. But a great guy, super guy, man. But he was a big guy to me. He was just, I don't think anybody was, and I don't mean, big in any other way, just stature. He was just huge. He was a huge man for me.
Huge personality.
Yeah, just everything about him, everything he did was huge.
One of the finest guys I ever met.
Yeah, just a nice.
Very clever.
Nice, but you had to get over that first moment of, oh, geez. And then he was just the best. He was the best.